Hello, welcome to part 4 of this playthrough of 80 Days. Note this game doesn't actually have a save function. When you quit, I guess it saves. Which means you can't go back. If something goes wrong, there's no going back because there's no saved versions unless they're hidden somewhere in an app data folder somewhere, I don't know. So, let's get on with the game. I'm heading to Manila as Jean Passepartout, Phileas Fogg's servant. Manila Harbour was a desolate, desperate-looking place. The Sugawara was a regal sight as she pulled up to the docks. "Good health to your Emperor, Captain," I called as we disembarked. "And you," she replied. "Do not drink the water." Beg. Monsieur Fogg looked steadfast. By now, I recognized the heavy look at my master's brow. "To our financial masters," he sighed. I regarded the manager of the nearest financial institution, a stocky, sweaty woman who met us with cool enthusiasm. "You would like to make a withdrawal?" the manager asked. "You may have to wait a day or two." Oh, ho, ho. "We require £1,500, I said. The manager scratched her cheek. "I will have to telegraph England, sir," she stated. "The money will be ready in 2 working days. Must remember to come back to the bank this time. Oh." "We can move straight away and stuff the bank, huh?" I think that is it. I need the others. Can I get rid of something? Could take that and get rid of the stupid American hat. So we have a complete set. Alright. Now, as we have enough It's going to be close, huh? Days. Well, we need to wait for the bank. I think we still need more money, so we'll wait for the bank. We arrived at the Spanish-governed capital of Manila at the most inopportune time. The city had recently suffered the depredations of a major typhoon, and the efforts at rebuilding had been stalled by an outbreak of the dreaded cholera morbus. It originated with sailors of the steamer Aeolus from the nearby town of Zamboanga. That was the local rumour in any case. Infected establishments were burned daily by the sanitary board, with our hotel one of the casualties. We located near to the telephone exchange, taking the mechanical horse-pulled tram. Concerned with the possibility of infection, I ensured that Monsieur Fogg drank only boiled water, as recommended by John Snow's article in the Medical Times and Gazette, going to the lengths of preventing him from eating any uncooked foods for fear of contamination. From our window, I could see carts piled high with the dead being taken to the mountain to be burned, rather than interred in a churchyard, which put me in a morbid frame of mind. I went to the local telegraph office and sent a message. To a dear friend in Paris. And just a friend, mes amis, a childhood companion whose quick smile and cheerful insults I yearned for in these morbid circumstances. I sent a philosophical tract, musing on love, death, and meaning in stuttering Morse code. I made my way back to the hotel under the fragrant coconut oil lamps, eager to part from this city riven by sickness and death. Relations with Fogg have strengthened slightly. I spent a few hours in exploration, discovering the options of how we might continue our journey. We made ourselves comfortable for the night, and I helped the kitchen staff to clean, earning £85 in fees and tips, as well as discovering from her that some buyers will pay well for binocular field glasses from Pyongyang. An excellent snippet. My funds have gone up somewhat. We collected our funds from the bank, and the manager wished us well. Let's get the hell out of this place, sir. I want to depart. Or have we missed the boat already? Tomorrow. With what remains of the day, I buffed and shone my master's pocket watch to ensure everything was ship-shape for our inevitable departure. I'm scrolling with the mouse wheel while pointing to get here. And back. That was cheaper than I thought. Good. We boarded the Reina Cristina on a Spanish Torres Crevedor type airship, its gondola shaped to resemble one of the infamous Spanish galleons of previous centuries, and was richly outfitted with Philippine hardwood furniture, Fijian silk curtains and lacquered ornamental automata imported from China. My cabin resembled a fashionable salon more than an airship berth. Oh, cholera spreading from Manila aboard airships. Oh, sacre bleu. Our journey to Honolulu would take 4 days. The airship would refuel and go on without us. From there, we had other plans. The Filipino crew spoke a mix of Tagalog and Spanish, all mixed in with Lascar sailors' cant, which rather hurt my tender ears. I had something of a skill for languages, but this mélange was utterly beyond me. Don't bother trying to learn it, the captain remarked in elegant Spanish. I can't do a Spanish accent. How does a Spanish accent go? Hey gringo, don't bother trying to learn it, the captain remarked in elegant Spanish. You need a sailor's heart to do so. Do you know it? I asked slyly. I am the captain of the ship you are travelling upon, he replied with a glitter in his dark, sick-lashed eyes. I can't do his accent. You should hope I have a sailor's heart. I think you do. I could not help giving him a smile, which he returned rather rakishly. Truly, he said, I meet the most remarkable people as captain of an airship. I can only do Spanish if I do "Hey gringo" first. Hey gringo, what's happening? A portrait of King Amadeus I hung in one of the relatively unused corridors of the gondola, which I was exploring in the hope of finding a secret or two, and indeed, I stumbled across a small room set with a crucifix and an altar. Clearly, someone aboard was literally a closet Christian. Over dinner, the captain told me about Honolulu, where we would stop on the morrow. If I believed his telling, it was all ripe fresh gravas and shark steaks, cooked over coals on soft sanded beaches lapped by pure blue water. As we settled down for the night, I was struck by an unrelated thought. Monsieur Fogg, the deadline. I have altered our watch already, Monsieur Fogg replied calmly. Did you think I might forget? My master was, of course, correct. With an eye such as his, it was unthinkable that he might miss such a detail. We had reached the point directly opposite Greenwich, where the hours we had lost in travelling around the earth were added back. A whole extra day. close shave. Superb. We arrived into Honolulu Bay in good time, and the crew landed us, then deflated the envelope to refill it. It was a while before we could retrieve our things, so I spent the time walking the beach, watching sharks frolicking in the crystal water. After Manila, this place was a paradise on earth. Then we were finally discharged from our duty as passengers, and the airship lifted away into the sky. No departures today. We should explore a little, indeed. "3,000 miles away. Arrives Thursday. Arrives Saturday. That looks better. Well, which Thursday and which Saturday?" Why is this Saturday? It was as though Honolulu lived in one indrawn breath, a wheeling swathe of sky, white-laced waves and pristine sand bounded by black volcanic bluffs. The town was entirely hidden behind groves of coconut and eucalyptus. We rested in a comfortable, palm-topped hut by the shoreline, breathing the sea air and trying to shake the weariness of the road. We boarded a steam barge from Honolulu to San Francisco. The scent of ripe bananas pervaded every plank of decking and bulkhead, a sweet and deliciously rotting odour, which offended my trained senses so greatly that for many months after I could scarcely look a banana in the peel. Fogg said to have crossed the dateline, but will extra day be enough? I don't think so. Arg, I half attempted to convince my mouth that I ate fried kippers and potatoes at breakfast. Everything smells of bananas. Monsieur Fogg replied that he could not smell a thing, which I took to be his queerly English sense of humour at work. Still, if bananas were to be the worst of my troubles aboard this boat, then that would be no bad thing. I woke in the middle of the night, convinced that someone was in the cabin with me. I stayed very still and listened. There was a long, wave-slapped silence until I heard distinctly a dragging shuffle. I opened my eyes and looked up, my heart beating impossibly loud in my chest. In the darkness, I saw the sheen of a pair of eyes gazing vacantly into the distance. "Monsieur Fogg!" I cried, and my midnight visitor blinked and straightened and looked about my cabin in genteel surprise. "What," he said calmly, pulling his dressing gown closed, "am I doing in your cabin, Passepartout?" "Scaring me half to death," I cried, rather upturned by his sudden appearance. He took a sharp breath. "It seems I have been sleepwalking," he said, his voice almost tremulous. "I have not done so since I was a child. Please accept my apologies." I let him take his leave, so he seemed strangely agitated. I pulled the thin blanket over my body and settled back into bed, hoping to find my way towards sleep before dawn. Relations with Fogg have deteriorated slightly. Captain Kalani was a heavily pregnant Hawaiian woman who found Monsieur Fogg's English accent a source of great mirth. "Say something else," she demanded over breakfast. "Please, Mr. Fogg." I let her amuse herself at my master's expense and looked on as she took him through an entire phrasebook of small talk as she consumed a heaping plateful of raw fish and pineapple with horrible relish. Monsieur Fogg gave me a beseeching look once or twice. Oh no, I must be mistaken. The monsieur is never ill at ease. "Greetings, Captain. Passepartout, take my arm a moment." "I'm very interested in San Francisco." "They say that San Francisco is one of the most advanced American cities." "The route from San Francisco to Salt Lake City is timetabled. On the subject of trains, I've heard my father was in an accident aboard the Pride from the south of Lima to Asuncion." "According to my timetable, Salt Lake City is connected to Burlington." "On the subject of trains, I've heard one can travel aboard the Canadian Pacific Railway from New York to Winnipeg, but the fare is worth saving up for." "Do tell me more about Winnipeg." "Winnipeg is a crossroads of sorts. Now, anyway, do you have any children yourself?" "Someday. One day, perhaps." "You should get a move on. You're not getting any younger." "Can you tell me more about Winnipeg?" "They say Winnipeg is home to the oldest woman in the world, but there's no one who can verify her claim." "Apparently Winnipeg is connected to New York, is that right?" "Did you know you can pick up rare and misprinted stamps in New York that will sell for a fortune in Lisbon?" "I haven't decided on an accent for her. I'm just doing everything." "What more can you tell me about Lisbon?" "Let me tell you that some buyers will pay well for binocular field glasses from Lisbon." "Do they mean buyers will pay for binocular field glasses in Lisbon? Or the glasses are from Lisbon? Are the buyers from Lisbon or the binocular field glasses?" I think there's some grammatical problem we've had in the game throughout, actually. "Can you travel from Lisbon to London?" "Absolutely. Lisbon is linked to London aboard the Madre de Dios, but the fare is extortionate." I awoke to a frantic knocking at my door and opened it to find Monsieur Fogg actually wringing his hands. "Passepartout," he said, his breath hitching. "Come quickly." "What is wrong, monsieur?" I cried, certain that something truly unspeakable was afoot, and I was not wrong. My master opened the door to his cabin to reveal Captain Kalani, red-faced and mourning upon his bed. She turned her baleful gaze in our direction. "I'm having my baby early," she hissed, sweat upon her upper lip. "You must help me." What should I do? I had intended to ask a question, but it came out more like a shout. "Will one of you hold my bloody hand and the other fetch some blasted water?" she retorted. I glanced at Monsieur Fogg, who said, "I will fetch the water," and left me to hold Captain Kalani's hand. "Are you in much pain?" I asked inanely. She gave me a look so full of venom that I felt a sudden sweat pricking my brow. Then she moaned aloud. Monsieur Fogg returned with a bucket of water, but our respite was short-lived. Captain Kalani parted her knees. "One of you," she said authoritatively, "must catch the baby." I steeled myself to the role and relinquished her hand to Monsieur Fogg. I tried to compose my expression into something cool and medical and detached, but I fear I met with mixed success at best. After an infinitely long, infinitely terrifying interval, which I have not the means to describe, I held a small, squalling, red-faced baby in my arms. I handed the creature over immediately, fearful that my hands would slip or that I would clutch too tightly. Captain Kalani was sweaty and wild-eyed and utterly exhausted. She held the baby to her chest as though it were an infinitely precious thing. She began to sing to her little girl a song of whales and ocean waves and airships that hung like moons in the sky. Eh, sacre bleu. Captain Kalani's indisposition the previous day did not delay us in the least. She had a well-trained and loyal crew who seemed to have collectively adopted her little girl as one of their own. I will call her Jean. Or Jean, Captain Kalani told us as we tethered at San Francisco. You are excellent midwives. I shuddered at the memory, and sincerely hoped I would not be called upon to help in any other births. Once, my dear friends, was plenty. The name suits her, madame, I said. She will wear it better than I have. I turned towards San Francisco Bay with renewed hope. After all, whatever challenges it offered could scarcely be more taxing than those we had just overcome. Three days at 5 p.m. Okay. Mr. Fogg looked somewhat weary by now. I was all too familiar with the look that came over my master's expression as he toddled his leisure. To the money pot, he declared. I regarded the manager of the local bank, an upper-class calm lady who welcomed us with greedy professionalism. We were quite £1,000, I declared. The manager waved to her assistant. I will need to contact London first, of course, she said. I should have your money on Monday. Return to the bank on Monday to collect your funds. San Francisco seemed less a city and more a ravenous beast bent on consumption of everything, even of itself. Within the ever-expanding city limits, enormous steam-powered drills and diggers flattened hills, straightened roads, reformed neighbourhoods, and dumped the resulting rubble and stone into Mission Bay. I sloped towards a recently constructed Long Bridge, which was crowded with families out for a stroll and people fishing for silvery smelt with long poles. In the water was a jangle of rowing boats racing each other and boatmen taking passengers out to Mission Rock. Cheers and good-natured shouts emitted from a halfway house in the middle of the bridge. I peered at the halfway house and surmised from the revels I saw spilling out from its doors, that it was some manner of drinking den. A man, red-faced and somewhat worse for drink, bumped into me. I excused myself politely, and he made an apology in return, stinging an arm around my shoulders. "Oh, hello!" he exclaimed. "You don't sound like you're from around here." "You do not sound American either," I retorted. "No matter, I was Dutch once in a past life, but now I'm as American as President Grant. This is a land of newcomers. You a prospector?" "I'm a traveller," I said. "I'm travelling around the world." He laughed. "Oh yeah, and I'm a Navajo chief." "Actually," I learned, leaning conspiratorially, "I am a jewels thief on the run." "What, really?" His eyes widened and he slapped his thigh. "That's incredible." A brown-skinned woman slipped her arm into his. I regarded her. She was wearing a ruffled walking dress in the latest European style, but with a short tasseled jacket embroidered with the patterns of her tribe. "Ah, my manners," he shook his ruddy face. "I am Anders, and this is my wife Jenny." A pleasure to meet you. I kissed her hand. She was surprised, but smiled. Always a pleasure to meet Anders' friends. She looked askance at the whisky flask in his hands, but seemed to find me unobjectionable. I hesitated, the obvious question about her origins on the tip of my tongue. I swallowed back the question, although clearly with a visible effort, for she laughed with full-throated pleasure. I am of the Marduk tribe, what the new Americans call Indians. Jenny rolled her eyes. I do not mind your surprise. Most of my tribe has been taken to the Klamath Reservation in Oregon. But you are not with them? I observed, realizing my faux pas as the words tumbled from my unthinking lips. Jenny sucked in a deep breath. I left my tribe, she whispered. Anders squeezed her hand. I fell in love in this world. I don't know who's speaking there. Women leave their families for their husbands. Oh, I fell in love in this world. Women leave their families for their husbands. I made a home of my choosing, which is more freedom than my tribe can claim. Anders whispered something into Jenny's ear, and she laughed, so I feared I had opened an old wound with my prying questions. I nodded and found my way back to Monsieur Fogg, who was sitting drinking tea with a disconsolate frown. It tastes like soap, he remarked, but would say no more. Wait 3 days and the train departs. When? In 3 days at 5 p.m. Should be okay. But it'll be a week, 67 days, to get across the United States. Do we wait for the bank? Yeah, we'd probably need the money. I headed towards Chinatown to eat. It was a warren of crowded wooden and brick houses, temples, businesses, herbalists, laundries, and market stalls selling fruit and flowers. I was interested in conversation, so I decided to approach a young man with a queue ponytail who was relaxing outside a small shop with arms outstretched. He seemed to me to be a labourer. Despite his slender frame, his arms were heavily muscled. His name was Jinghuo, and he was enjoying his single day off from working on the Transcontinental Railway to New York. Is the land done? I asked, and he shot me a wary look. Nearly, but no. Outlaws keep stealing lengths of track. It is open to the public as far as Burlington. Still, I should not complain. At least I have a job. What would he do once the railway was complete? Alas, I had little time to ponder this, as I had to bid him a hasty goodbye and return to my master. Day 61, Monsieur Fogg murmured that night in his sleep. There's still some distance yet to travel. Indeed, and if there is no railway line past Burlington, what are we to do? Perhaps we should go to Calgary and stuff the bank, yes? Let's do it. We took passage with one Monsieur Williamson, a dark-haired, keen-eyed fellow with a magnificent leather coat. More relevantly to our requirements, a well-used gyrocopter. Do you make this journey often? I inquired. Every month, he told me, jovially enough. The city folk in San Francisco can't get enough of furs, and I visit regularly to ply my trade. I could not see any space for cargo, and repeated my observation to him. He laughed. On the southbound journey, the furs were piled high where you and your master sit, he said. Though not as high as I might have liked. His voice roughened. I have had a bad season. I'm sorry to hear that. Ah, well, he grimaced. Sometimes luck goes against you. That's the way of the world. Indeed so, I agreed, thinking of the various disasters and hairbreadth escapes we ourselves had experienced on our journey. Monsieur Williamson chuckled, and we began our journey north companionably enough. ceasing our conversation only when the sound of the gyrocopter's blades against the wind muffled our voices. Fogg now in debt, says Bank Sauce. Surely not. We saw the smoke and steam of San Francisco in its full scale as we left the city. The great iron line of the cross-continental railway snaked east over the horizon, an enterprise almost too vast to contemplate. How do you find the city? He wiped some soot from his goggles and grinned. San Francisco is a place where a man may make his mark, where he has no history but what he creates for himself. And you would want to be one of these new men? I asked shrewdly, shorn of history, ready to make your mark. Monsieur Williamson sighed heavily. My mother has a passion for history. She fought for better treatment of the First Nations tribes, though thought that we Canadians were destroying their lands, their heritage. She even married and had a child with a Musqueam tribesman. He indicated his own person with a flourish. He indicated his own person with a flourish. Do you regret your circumstances? He shook his head. What did it serve them? My mother is a laughingstock amongst her peers, and my father's people dwindle to nothingness. He looked away. Their history is a burden I do not wish to carry. I understand, I told him, and I shrugged. I wish you luck in whatever you choose to be. He smiled and turned away. The second day we flew down the endless forested coast, and it seemed as though we travelled across a different planet than the one of my birth. It is a wilderness, I exclaimed. That it is, Monsieur Williamson agreed, though I saw my master politely look askance, which I took to mean that he was suffering from the movement in the air, so I clambered back and attended to his comfort as best I could for the rest of the day. Monsieur Williamson shot me a grateful look and shook my hand with great care after we landed in Gastown's tiny aeroport. Good luck to you too, Passepartout, he told me fervently. Perhaps you will find yourself anew here also. I haven't found out how to get out of Gastown. Let's sell stuff. It's not very valuable, is it? Sell the wardrobe set? I don't think so. Goodness me. Sell for $1. That's not worth it, is it? Gastown was supposedly named after one Gassy Jack, a Yorkshire steamboat captain turned barkeep. It served as a drinking hall for loggers and fishermen from inland, as well as the sailors and air crews of the ships drawn to the Barrard Inlet for trade. It was a rough and ready sort of place, and I found it uncouth and unappealing, just like its hedonistic inhabitants. The one luxury in the town was its distributed steam heating system. Steam hissed warmly through the grates in the town's pavements, and even powered a steam clock, which whistled the time to the town's citizens every hour. A strange symbol of society's progress, but one that was no doubt as potent as the newly built depot for the Canadian Pacific Railway parallel to Water Street. Gastown was, for better or worse, a truly modern town. I walked the streets for a while, hunting for ways in which we might travel onwards. £4,000. Oh, sacré bleu. The conductor, a dark-haired First Nations woman, eyed me dubiously. "First time on the Canadian Pacific Railway?" she asked. "Is it so obvious?" She refrained from rolling her eyes. "The line runs from Gastown all the way to Ottawa, so you have to change at Winnipeg. It's the first transcontinental railway in the Dominion of Canada." I guess I should have some sort of... I don't know what accent she would have. She paused, fixing me with a look. I felt some kind of response was expected of me, so I said, "Very good." "That's not the good part," she continued. "The railway isn't owned by the government or a private company, but by the Blackfoot Confederacy. This here is First Nations territory, so no smoking, no liquor, and no firearms, you hear?" "Yes, madame," I nodded, not wanting to find myself on this formidable woman's bad side. Indeed, she quite reminded me of my own dear maman. The steam whistle sounded twice, and I hurried back to Monsieur Fogg as we pulled out of the station. The train began its journey, but it was only once we were underway that we realised the terrible truth. The train, although comfortable, was slow, and a full journey across Canada was going to take over a week, not including times for changes. We began to consider more seriously the options of stopping halfway and finding other ways forward instead. "Greetings, Monsieur Fleet." "Good day there." "One can also travel this way to Regina, I understand." "You mentioned trains. I've been told my childhood sweetheart helped build the Canadian Pacific Railway from Ottawa to New York." I think I got the wrong accent for him. But "You mentioned trains. I've been told my childhood sweetheart helped build the Canadian Pacific Railway from Ottawa to New York." I don't know. "One can also travel this way to Winnipeg, I understand." "On the subject of trains, I've heard my mother once took the Winnipeg and Duluth Railroad from Chicago to Winnipeg." "Some buyers will pay well for harmonicas from Chicago." I guess it's buyers from Chicago will pay well for harmonicas, yes. "Is it possible to travel from Chicago to Washington?" "I don't think so, friend. But now, do you like Canada? What do you think? It's a wild place, too wild for some." "I have particular fear of bears, if I'm quite honest." "Ah, bears, yes. We have rather a lot of bears, that's true." "The route from Chicago to Atlanta is timetabled." "You mentioned trains. I've been told Chicago will be reached from Winnipeg aboard the Winnipeg and Duluth Railroad." "Tell me more about Chicago." "I could tell you about a time." "It's possible to travel from Chicago to Duluth." Enough talking. Let's see what we found out. Monsieur Fogg and I were in a shared carriage, and I found my eye caught by a quite métisse woman with two surly teenagers in tow. "Where are you headed?" I asked curiously. "Calgary," the woman replied, casting a quelling glance at the teenagers. Our aunt lives here. Perhaps she'll have better luck getting my brothers to listen. So you're in charge of them for now? The girl snorted. For what it's worth, they only ever listened to Papa, and he's gone now. She turned away, biting her lip. That rather put paid to any further conversation. I contented myself with looking out of the window at the passing countryside, ignoring the heaviness in the air. Fogg Valet the Brains, full report. Monsieur Fogg barely lifted his head from his ledger as the train pulled into Calgary. Much to my amusement, he kept his nose in the book even as we disembarked. Is that it, huh? Monsieur Fogg and I have been banned from ever returning to the town of Calgary. Parbleu! I am veritably seething from the injustice as I write this fatal record of what transpired. Truly, it was a most dreadful misunderstanding, the kind that can haunt a man for years afterwards. It began with a punch. I neither threw the punch, nor was I in its path, but I did, unfortunately, happen across an alley in time to witness it. It was 3 against 1, an unfair fight, and the victim went down with a hard thump, blood spraying the wall. I thought I spied a pried loose tooth tumbling to a stop and shining against the dirt as his assailants began to kick the prone man's form. All 4 of the men were First Nations, although the victim was dressed in a coat, jacket and cowboy boots, hair cropped close, while his attackers were in traditional clothes, hair in braids under their thick hoods. I admit I cursed under my breath at the sight before shouting at them to stop. They barely looked up, and the meanest-looking one in the bunch aimed a particularly vicious kick at the fallen man's head. I launched myself at the man while his foot was in the air, tackling him to the dirt-packed floor with a heavy grunt. The others pulled me off him, and the fight was on. I managed to distract them from their prone target, and held my own remarkably well against their attacks, but it was 3 against 1 again, and only a matter of time before they took me down. I hoped I would be able to limp back to my master after all was said and done. That simple thought stiffened my spine. A sharp whistle interrupted my musings, and still the fists flying at my head. Well, 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 a rough American-accented voice drawled. Looks like we got here just in time. Stupid of you boys to go after one of my interpreters and beat up a white man besides. You'll be strung up for that alone. They were hardly the words of a peacemaker, and I all but rolled my eyes at this unnecessary escalation. And I did not care to find myself in solidarity with one of such opinions. But I did rather need to be rescued, so kept my mouth shut. The Americans turned out to be whiskey traders. The fellow who had been jumped was a Cree man they used as a go-between. Apparently, he had been trying to sell liquor illegally to some of the First Nations teenagers at the nearby Tues Thurs reservation, and being caught out by a group of concerned and angry parents. I could not countenance the Tues Thurs' violent response and said so, but the men merely laughed bitterly. They come and sell their poison to our children and young people. They profit off destroying lives, and that is what you have to say? They shook their heads. A bottle of whiskey is more dangerous than a fist. Or a bullet. I looked at the eldest of the Tsutina men, who was watching the Cree boy with veiled sympathy. We have to fight to protect what is ours. These people profit from our softness, our kindness, so we must lock such feelings away. The hard-eyed American in the lead cleared his throat. Enough talk. He drew his pistol from his holster and settled into a shooter's stance. Time to settle this. Time to settle this. 3 more brown corpses won't even raise an eyebrow. I stood in front of the Tsutina as a shield. What about the white man's corpse, monsieur? Move away, friend. The gun did not waver, not even for a second. This is your last warning. No, I said simply, and he shot me. Well, he would have, if the Cree youth had not shoved me away and then collapsed on top of me. Oof, I huffed. The youth cast me an unreadable look and scrambled to his feet. He ran over to the whiskey traders as fast as his feet would carry him, and I didn't blame him in the least. But something tumbled out of his pocket and landed in the dirt. A rectangular device blinking with green and yellow lights. You dropped something, I shouted, and the kid looked back. He looked positively green at the sight of the device, but was dragged away by the whiskey traders before he could dart back and pick it up. So it was something important to him, eh? I pocketed it before it could be trod on and resolved to examine it more closely later. The whiskey traders marched away with their charge, and by the time I dusted myself off, the Tsutina men had made themselves scarce as well. All that remained was yours truly in an alley with bullet shells and blood scattered in the dirt, which was of course when the Northwest Mounted Police arrived and arrested me. I was released in a matter of hours, with a stern warning, though I protested my innocence. I gave Monsieur Fogg a full account of my actions, despite the tightening of his lips. I think, he said after a chilly silence, that we have quite worn out our welcome in this city, Passepartout. It is past time to be on our way. We rejoined the Canadian Pacific Railway once more, the engine stamped with the buffalo horn mark of the Blackfoot engineers. The last run had been smooth, we could only hope for more of the same. Greetings, Madame Lagarde. Tickets, please. I'm told the Winnipeg is connected to New York. Never mind that, the quickest way to New York from here is through Ottawa. Tell me more about Ottawa. Have you heard that some buyers will pay well for walrus teeth from Ottawa? But now, is our engine not impressive? In the early part of the game I was getting confused by that grammar. Walrus teeth from Ottawa. No, it's buyers from Ottawa. Bad grammar. Is our engine not impressive? Indeed. It is. We will build bigger and better ones in future, you will see. What else do you know about Ottawa? Oh, just the same, huh? Is it possible to travel from Ottawa to Toronto? Doubt it. Ottawa to Quebec? Yes, one can travel by local hire car from Ottawa to Quebec City, but the fare is well beyond most travellers. The lunch carriage was abuzz with gossip. Bowls of soup lay cooling and unserved as the waiters exchanged the latest news with passengers. I drifted towards one of the tables, hoping to overhear something. My subtlety proved quite unnecessary. A young canine waiter with a stylish leather jacket practically vibrated with eagerness to update me. "Oh, sir, one of the passengers spotted it this morning. His voice dipped dramatically. "Kawaka Ofunway." A what? I blinked in befuddlement. The waiter slowed his pronunciation. Kawaka Ofunway. It means floating village in Lakota. And does it float? Oh. And does it float? Oh, sir! Some say it is a myth, a village that floats in the sky. But look! The man completely ignored me, pointing out of the carriage window and garnering the interest of several onlookers. It was seen near Regina by someone on this very train only this morning. Who saw it then? I asked mildly. The waiter, of course, ignored me and beckoned to one of his friends. The second waiter seemed as overexcited as the first. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's true! He lowered his voice and beckoned us closer. I leaned in against my better judgment, and he continued in hushed tones. The floating village was built by the Sioux, but it is a place for all whose people are oppressed and whose lands are encroached upon. It is a place where peoples of different tribes and bands and races may come together in peace and secrecy. The head cook seized both gossiping waiters by each ear and dragged them off before they could continue. I wonder what Monsieur Fogg would make of such strange tales. The previous day's gossip had not died down by the time we reached Regina. Monsieur Fogg seemed uncharacteristically pensive, and I inquired into the matter obliquely. My master would certainly not admit to any feelings if confronted directly. Do you wish to disembark here? I asked him. He considered the matter for a moment, then nodded sharply. A capital idea. And that was that. We quickly gathered our things. I wonder if there really is such a thing as a floating village, he murmured, and then seemed to shake himself. Come along, Passepartout, he said sharply. There is much to do. Zut alors, how I worry for my master with each passing day. So we will stop there, and I'll see you in the next, whatever it is. Part 5 probably.